Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving to a Subscription-Based Business, a Practical Guide, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by BluLogix. My name is Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent to you within 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode, and your webinar controls, including volume, are found at the toolbar at the bottom of your webinar player. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the presenters at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the top left corner of the webinar player, and we will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. Lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting one of the full screen button options, which are located on the top right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. John Ragsdale, Distinguished Researcher and Vice President of Technology Ecosystems for TSIA, and Yusuf Yagmor, CEO of BluLogix. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump right in and get started. John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. For more than a decade, TSIA has been explaining to companies the business imperative of moving to the cloud and to a subscription business. But we don't always provide the roadmap on how to get there. And I'm very happy to have Yusuf back with us. We've done a lot of webinars together over the last few years. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in the industry and has worked with a lot of tech companies in making that transition to the cloud and subscription model and e-commerce. And he's going to be talking about some of the common challenges, how to overcome them, and really give you a practical guide to moving to a subscription business. So to set the stage, I've got a few data points kind of showing where we are in that transformation and some of the challenges along the way. You know, I'm in Silicon Valley, and there are so many born in the cloud companies here that we sometimes forget that not all companies have made that transformation, and actually some companies haven't made a lot of progress at all. When we surveyed our members transitioning to selling subscriptions, 54% said that that was their main priority for 2022. So, you know, they're still trying to figure this out. And that includes the people, the process, the technology, and as we're going to talk about a little bit later, definitely the culture of the company all requires some change. If we look from a revenue perspective, I've got some data here from 3 of our research practices. For our customer success members, 54% of their revenue is coming from subscription, and that's no surprise because usually you introduce your customer success organization as a part of the move to subscription because they're tasked with adoption and retention. From support services, we're still seeing that 39% are subscriptions, 35% still coming from the legacy hardware and software. Similar on professional services, it's about equal. So that shows, I would say, probably 100% of those companies have offers for the cloud, but they're still getting a lot of revenue from that legacy technology. And there is a lot of work to do and to help them move forward. So one of those transitions is embracing e-commerce. And I just read a Forrester study that said 75% of B2B buyers want to make their purchases 100% online with no conversation with a sales rep. And so we know that's how customers want to buy technology. 53% of our members say they have e-commerce available for initial purchase of technology. But when you look at the percentage of revenue coming through that channel, it's pretty small. So we're going to be talking today about, why is it that we're not pushing that model more. And I think that there's a lot of culture issues at stake here, which we're going to be talking about. But I think it's fair to say that even the companies who have introduced more e-commerce and online self-service for sales, those solutions are still lacking some maturity. And this is from our education services members who are offering online learning subscriptions. And, more than half of them aren't enabling price books by location. And when we ask why that was, it's really because they don't have the ability in their online selling tools to do that. And it's very complicated having not only understanding what the local market will bear, and the pricing is going to be very different globally, but just dealing with the currencies and the tax jurisdictions is just beyond the scope of a lot of companies. And that's where you've got to look to an expert to navigate that for you. And I also want to talk about renewals. So clearly the bulk of your revenue in a subscription is coming from renewing and expanding each of those contracts. And this is something that's got to be automated as well. And yet less than half of our members are offering auto-renew capabilities. And the percentage of business that's coming through that automated channel is, again, very, very small. So if we're going to allow our success managers and account managers to scale, we've got to begin introducing more automation capabilities through the entire customer lifecycle. And again, when we survey buyers, they prefer auto renewals. They don't want to have to go through a painful in-person selling process to renew that contract. And the final data point I wanted to share about the maturity of cloud and as-a-service offers is this was a poll that we did during our recent event in Orlando. And 82% of companies do not even have a framework for modeling the financial objectives of their as-a-service offers. And only about a third feel that the team that's tasked with doing this has been really identified and they've got confidence in them. So again, I think that we continue to see this almost as an art project within some legacy companies. And as of yet, they don't seem to be really, really serious on what to do it, who's responsible, and how to go about executing that. So enough doom and gloom from me. I'd like to turn things over now to our guest speaker today. Youssef Yagmour is the CEO of BluLogix. Youssef, welcome back to TSIA webinars.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. It's good to be here, and it's nice to meet everybody. As you can see from the title of the webinar, we've called it Moving to a Subscription Business. But what I really want to talk about is something beyond just subscription. I'd like to talk about the as-a-service model. Subscription happens to be at the entry level of that, but offering your services as a service is really the real transformation out there in the industry. So my focus is going to be at that. We've chosen the term subscription just because it's more understood and it's more popular as a term. But like I said, we will focus on the bigger picture of as a service. The agenda for that is my business ready for that subscription or as a service model? Is it right for me? We will talk about that. And obviously, probably the most suitable answer for something like this, and I will start with it, is it's actually suitable for a lot of businesses, even managed services. I mean, it is not just because you have digital services that you can think of as a service. It is actually, it does work for a lot of businesses, and we will talk about that in more details. Then we will talk about how you can actually create a strategy or formulate a plan for that, emphasizing on how important the team that is going to play in this plan and in this transformation, because making sure having the right team is going to be very important. The next point will be what are the things that you have and you need to consider, and maybe things that you haven't thought about that are going to impact that transformation journey. So we will talk about that. The last point will be how do you choose the right software tools and what it is that you need to look for in that software tools, one or more, and we will talk about that. This is the agenda for our webinar today. The first statement that I would like to put on the table here is that you cannot think of the as a service as a service model. It is actually a revenue model. You can practically sell almost everything as a service, regardless of what kind of service that you are delivering to your customers, be it an actual commodity or a digital service or even human services. And I'm going to use a few examples basically from the industry just to explain that idea. I don't know if you have noticed recently that even some car manufacturers in the US today have actually offered something called subscription for their cars. You do not have to lease a car from a manufacturer to be able to have access to cars. You can actually go to certain manufacturers today and get a bundle of access to cars. Instead of dedicated lease one that you have in your garage, you can go and have access to cars along with insurance and sometimes along with additional services that comes to that. So they've changed from here is the car, take it, put it in your garage, regardless of how much you use it and how extensive you use that car. Instead, here is access to a pool of cars along with a bundle of services that you can actually use more. It's very practical, it's getting a lot of attraction. So that is an example that we never thought about that could be offered to the market as a service. Another good example in the industry is what's happening to car insurance. Some auto insurance companies today, the reason why they started thinking about this new offering is you might be having a car that you only drive it for 100 miles a month versus somebody who's driving it for, let's say, 1,000 miles a month. You're both paying for the same insurance. So insurance companies started saying, well, why don't we change it? We'll have a small premium for the car every month, and then you pay as you go. If you drive it for 100 miles, you pay for that consumption, whereas the person that drives the car for 1,000 miles will be paying more, which sounds fair, which sounds more attractive to customers, which is actually an opportunity to grow the revenue. And we will talk about revenue growth in a minute. Another example basically that actually happened after I prepared the slide, which is one of our existing customers. They're in the SaaS business, basically. They were trying to see how they can not simply repackage some of their reselling, but also find the ability to introduce new products and new services. A lot of what they do are related to human work, and some of their managed services, some of their human services have been delivered to customers by human beings, by certain experts, by subject matter experts. How can they offer that actually on an as a service model? So our idea to them to help them go through that transformation, as a matter of fact, open a new line of revenue for them is, okay, let's take everything that your team of experts, it's a company that does business worldwide, let's take a look at the expertise, the case studies, the help, and all the accumulated knowledge that all of your team members have actually been able to do and deliver in the past. Can you actually create some kind of knowledge transfer as a knowledge base as a result of that? Can you put case studies? Can you put questions and answers? Can you actually put processes and diagrams? So what we've done, we've actually helped them, guided them to transform some of these managed services that was strictly delivered by human into digital data. And they've actually offered that in a marketplace as a subscription with some kind of added human service on top of that. So if you're in the business of doing service like specific SaaS product in, let's say, one of the verticals, be it, for example, process engineering or re-engineering, then you would take a case study that is similar to yours. You would look at that and you pay for that subscription, and then you get human being involved or an expert involved, and it becomes an added service. This is a model that we're actually helping one of our customers go through today. It just happened that we started to engage with them right after I prepared this slide. So I thought I'd throw that in. And that actually takes us from that concept into this one. So the first really journey, the first step in that migration, in that transformation, is it's actually thinking about how you sell it, not how you deliver it, which is the other meaning of as a service is actually a revenue model. It is not a service model. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is how do you productize these services? The example I just gave you is a good one. You've taken human services, managed services that used to be ours, and you've actually transferred that into line items, into a catalog item, list of items in your catalog for processes, for access to knowledge, for access to use cases, for forms and step-by-step guidance into how you can do these kind of services or these transformations. So the first thing you do is, okay, I'll take my services, how do I productize them? How do I put them in a catalog? And how do I create the flexibility and the adaptability in this catalog so I can create bundles, so I can offer products in certain regions, prices in certain regions, as the example John gave us a little early. The next point that you want to consider is how should I charge for it? How do I charge for that service? Is it just subscription, $10.99 a month, or is it pay as you go, or is it a bundle of services, or is it complex consumption, or is it a combination of both? So start with a monthly recurring fee, for example, with an overage for additional hours or additional services or additional access to information. Anything you can really meter or quantify within the service, you can turn it into something like as a service model. Like I said, recurring or pay as you go or consumption or metered. So the second thing you want to do is to decide how that looks like. Obviously, you need to be flexible. You can start with certain assumptions, learn from the feedback of your customers and sometimes your competitors, and adapt that kind of offering and make it available to your customers. The last point that you can talk about as you productize it and as you create your catalog is how much do you want to charge for that service? And here, offering dynamic pricing, offering discount, offering bundles, offering tiered pricing based on consumption, based on number of units, based on number of users, based on number of services that they buy from you. The more flexibility you can create around that, obviously, I can see that some of you would be thinking, do I have the right tool to actually support that? And we will talk about that towards the end when we talk about choosing the right tool to help you with that journey. So be dynamic, offer flexible structures, discount, different terms. If you sign a 3-year contract with me, we're going to give you a preferred price. If you pay in advance, I'll give you a discount. These are all just examples of ideas you can create a flexible pricing model.
Yusuf, can I ask a question real quick? We at TSIA, we talk a lot about selling outcomes and outcome-based pricing or value-based pricing, and everybody's really interested in that because customers love the concept, but I'm not seeing a lot of people go to market with those kind of offers. Are you seeing any examples of that, or are they still just kind of flirting with the idea?
I think it's an early start of that, and when I talk to some of customers about that, because that definitely came up recently, I see 3 challenges basically stopping customers from exploring that. Number one is they don't have the right tool to actually offer that and manage it. It becomes a manual management, and nobody wants to do their business and manage it manually, especially when it comes to volume and complexity. So that is the first one. The second one is the internal business culture challenge. Do people really understand how to sell and how to talk to customers about that? And can I get my sales and marketing team to actually come up with the right messaging? I know that this is something that we all face challenges with. How do I get the right message across to my prospects or customers so that I can explain my story easily and get people interested in it? So that's the second challenge, is getting the right business culture in that. And that's one of the points that we really talk about. And the third one is, can I really quantify that easily? Can I meter that easily? And I need to think out of the box. I mean, people used to do just time and volume for metering things. Is this the only thing that you can really use for metering services? No, you could be very creative, and there could be a lot of ideas on that. maybe in a webinar, and that's a suggestion to you, John, is we actually dedicate a webinar to talk about the complexities and the scale of how you define your charging, because there's complexity on how you charge and there's complexity how you actually bill your customers. And when you learn the options, how you can do that, that feeds into a lot of ideas for your business and do it. I hope that answers the question, John.
Thank you.
So the next one is as a service model the right model for me, and how important is it, and why should I do it? Well, the first answer to that question is you have to do it because this is where the market is. John just shared with us the percentage of adoption that you see out there. The market is going, the trend is very clear. So you don't want to lose on this opportunity. You don't want to get to a point where you're losing customers because you don't have as a service or recurrent revenue model, for example, and offer it to your customers. And you don't want to be the last person to move. That's the first part of the answer. The second one, it's actually a new revenue stream for you. A new revenue stream in the sense is that now, with the example of digital content from your human services that we just talked about, this is a new revenue stream that you've never thought about, because the only thing you were selling before that was just the hours of your professional services or your subject matter experts. Now you've actually created digital content. It's definitely a new revenue stream. It is also a new way to sell. It is also a new way to a new market to reach. Maybe I've been selling enterprises that can only buy from me or can afford my services because of the barrier of entry. Now I can go to basically a different customer segment or a different industry because I was able to change my services and change the way I charge. And then the next point is, transactional business is all upfront investment, is all a significant amount of money, which is usually basically a CapEx that customers have to come up with. The new trend with that is I'd like it to be an OpEx. I'd like to pay something that is on a monthly basis. I don't want to come up with an expensive upfront investment with that. And as we talk about that, let's remember what COVID did to us. Customers were not interested in paying $1 million upfront for a service to buy it, even though, it's actually an OpEx and you will be able to amortize that over time. But the interest and the need and the desire and even the willingness to pay these upfront investments has actually changed. And with this recession that is looming over our heads and that everybody is talking about, maybe this is a way to lower the barrier of entry, and maybe this is a way to get more customers and get more business in the future and have your customers ready for that. So that's at least 3 reasons why you should consider as a service and subscription in your business model. The second point is the value of recurring revenue is much higher than the value of transactional revenue. The first thing is even, for example, in the valuation of your business, in the valuation of your company, in the eyes of your shareholders, in the eyes of the market, the valuation and the value of recurring business today is much higher than transactional. So that's the first one. 2, when you have recurring revenue, that's more predictable. These are contracts that are easy to manage. This is consistent income that you're getting on a monthly basis, even if you get annual contracts, even if you get upfront payment for that in advance, that is still predictable revenue for you, and that is much better cash flow management for your business. With that, and if you have the right tools, the renewability of the business, your capability, your team's ability to manage the renewal of the contract is a more attractive. If you have the right tools to manage the renewal, then you can turn that complexity into some automation, and you can guarantee that this business is going to stay with you. That recurring business is going to stay with you beyond the first year, and it doesn't have to cost you so much of your sales team's effort to actually go for it. So that is another attractive point why you should consider recurring revenue and as a service business. The chance to upsell, if you've got consistent payment, consistent relationship with the customer using your services, using your digital services, using your managed services, using your products, then you've got the opportunity to upsell. You can read from customer data. You can read from the trends. This is why at the end of this, we will talk about the importance of having a dashboard that gives you the market data and the performance data that you need, because you can take all that and then convert it to some upselling plans, convert it to revenue growth, convert it to expansion using your existing customers. The last point that I'll talk about here is the pricing flexibility. It allows you to be flexible with the prices. It allows you to respond to the market much quicker when you go with recurring revenue to that. It allows you to respond to market changes, to industry changes, to technology changes. So you become much more responsive in your business, and you'll be able to grow this way. The third point that I want to talk about here is the importance of exploring both direct and indirect model. We all know that channel is a part of almost every business in the US. You can only reach so much with your direct model. So considering both a direct and indirect model, a channel, in other words, is actually something important to the success of the as-a-service model. When you consider the direct model, you want to look into the tools that offer you self-management to your customers. As John indicated in one of the slides, that more than 70% of customers would like touch-free. They don't want any human being involved. They like to transact all of that basically electronically. So self-managed service is important. Transacting your commerce digitally is also important, and that's all part of empowering and preparing your tools to handle direct business. Having customer portal for customer success and customer help and customer management is also important in preparing your business for direct model in the as a service. And the last piece here is being able to go global. Once you're in the internet, you're in the internet. People from across the globe should be able and can reach your services. So why not equip your business and prepare it to actually be global, whether being able to handle international logistics, whether you're being able to handle languages, currencies, compliance. Prepare your business to do that, and that gives you access to markets that you haven't considered in the past. On the channel side, if you are a service provider, you want your channel to be ready to sell, and sometimes they don't have the right tools and they don't have the right infrastructure to be able to do that. So what you want to consider is actually have the right tools to empower your channel and have the right tools to enable them. And one of the most important pieces, the points that I would like to mention here is, as you are enabling your channel, keep in mind that they would like to maintain customer loyalty. They would like to feel that they own the customer experience and they own the customer. So the tools that you should consider to empower your channel is those tools that actually offer that. Allow your channel, your reseller, distributors, agent, to actually co-brand it or even white label it, and at the same time own the customer loyalty, because that gives you the growth that you're looking for. Now, what are the steps that you should take to formulate your plan and your strategy for that transformation? Remember, subscription or the as-a-service transformation, you have to change the way you're doing business. If you don't, you probably won't be as successful. And there are certain challenges that you have to consider. The first one is, do I have the right team? You cannot go and do that new business and new revenue model with the same mindset, with the same team. It could be that you have to go for a new team completely. It could be that you have to repurpose your team. And I would like to actually put a word of advice here for those that are in the sales organization, in the sales part of the organization, and in the revenue management part of the organization. It's actually more of an advice and to a certain extent a warning. Why don't you become the agent of change in your organization? Why don't you take the initiative to actually drive your organization in that direction? So learn more about how to do that. Learn more about how you can transform your transactional business to subscription, and learn new techniques and new ways to get leads based on that, and new marketing messaging and new sales process, so that you can really do that business. Do not fear the change, because for the same reason that we are telling the organizations and the businesses to change, the teams themselves need to adapt and change. Otherwise, you're facing the same risk. So that is a message to the business owners, the business executives, as well as the people in the operational and sales part of the organization. This is very important because if you don't get your team ready, if you don't get the right team, the results are not going to be that attractive.
Youssef, I referred earlier to cultural change that's required, and that's exactly what I was alluding to. And it seems that not really looking at, in particular, how the role of the sales team and the comp of the sales team is changing, seems to force a lot of companies to keep dragging their feet on making the change because they don't want to have that tough conversation. So are you seeing them creating new models that are, appealing to the sales team when they're not going to be selling these huge upfront deals that they're getting commission on?
John, I was going to talk about that in the next slide, but this is part of the region is fear of change. Okay, they're used to getting commission this way. I sell a deal for $1 million and I'm getting my commission upfront basically for that. And obviously, if you take this formula and try to apply it basically on the recurring revenue or on the as a service, the sales organization might think that I'm going to get only 10% of what I used to get. No, it should be different. I think you should be creative of how you restructured your commission package so that your sales team is compensated the same way that they used to be compensated in the past in terms of amount. They just get paid for that differently. It just gets calculated differently. And that's part of the business culture change, which I will talk about in a minute. But before I leave the team challenge is, one of the questions is generally, what kind of teams do I need for that? So we've just listed, it is what the technology needs to be enabled. It's kind of like, this is the kind of teams that you want. And it's very similar to what you did in terms of team. You just need to repurpose them. So you need a team that knows how to manage the digital orders, how to quote and how to manage online transactions, and how to create a catalog. So that's your revenue management team with new techniques and new approaches and basically a new business culture. You need a billing team. You need a finance team. That billing team needs to know how to manage the pricing, how to handle the complexity of charges, the complexity of billing, the complexity of delivering the invoice and getting the online payment and management. So that is needed. You always had a finance team, but it's time for your finance team to think and learn how you manage, for example, revenue recognition if you've collected something in advance because there's compliance issues. So these are the kind of teams. You need service management team, and obviously you need the channel team. And in the middle, you need someone who takes the ownership of how do I automate all of that and how do I choose the right tools, because without the right automation, you probably don't have the scalability that you want. So that's usually the kind of teams that you want. Obviously, we can talk more if some customers and some of the audience are interested in talking more. Feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to discuss how you can do that. John just touched on the commission side of the business culture, but that's only one of the aspects. You really have to change it. One is how you sell. Before that, how you even create the right catalog and the product, and how you train people to do that, and then training your people to sell differently and getting the logistics to handle the delivery of service different than how you did that. There are big names in the industry that were typically, for example, they manufacture boxes. We worked with a customer at some point that did basically equip refrigerating trucks, basically refrigerator trucks. I don't want to use the term reefer because it might mean something else. They simply equipped those trucks with IoT devices that read critical data, basically, and transmitted that to a central that monitored the truck, the temperature, the distance traveled, location, etc. And obviously the logistics to deliver this kind of service, because you're no longer just getting the truck to a warehouse and installing something and moving. These are things that are moving dynamically. So changes in the logistics and changes in the way you operate, this kind of business adaptation and business culture change is necessary for this journey to be successful. Obviously, We talked about the team change, and we talked about how you must keep your staff, especially your sales team, motivated to do that. Your project delivery team, because now project delivery and service delivery and operations team have become an essential part of that success. So you might want to consider even compensating them for something like this. That compensation should go beyond, it's a recommendation, it should go beyond just the sales team, and look at restructuring that in the rest of the organizations. These are just examples what you need to consider in changing the business culture. Now the next point is, okay, what are the things that you need to consider? What are the questions that you need to ask yourself if you're going through that journey? And the first thing, we've touched on that a little bit, is think about the flexibility. And simply, the flexibility comes from the catalog. How can I package my product? How can I productize my services so that I can change them easily? Obviously, that has an impact, as you just asked, John. It has an impact on choosing the right tool, because if you don't, and every time you need to change something, you have to go through a developer, or you have to pay for customization, or this on that, you're not really using the right tool to do that. So, and it is important to understand that a lot of this flexibility that you're talking about comes from the catalog, from the ability to create a powerful catalog, and easy to manage, a navigation, something that allows you to create bundles, and something that allows you to create flexible pricing, consumption as a service, pay as you go, all these models. So this is where the flexibility comes from, and that's one very important point. And to us, this is basically the first and foremost that you have to consider when you are going through that journey. The next point is scalability. One of the research companies actually published a paper about that, and we're happy to share it with customers that are interested in. And they said most customers, most service providers that went for a solution or a platform that didn't handle volume well, and that didn't handle complexity well, i.e., it did not scale well, it did not have the automation, they ended up having to replace the platform within 18 to 24 months. So this is something very important. Transactional business, you might be able to sell 100, basically do 100 deals for a revenue of $30 million. In the as a service model, you're doing maybe 1 billion transactions to be able to get 30 million in revenue. So the scalability here is very important. You can't do it with people. You have to do it with automation, and you have to do it with the right tools. So that's something very important to consider as you're making that journey. Profit margin is something that we see a lot of companies tend to overlook, because maybe because they don't have the right tools, maybe because they thought just being profitable at the end of every month is enough. But what we found to be very important and actually critical to the success is being able to track your profit margin for every transaction and for every product that you sell. Excuse me for a minute. Now, it is very important to be able to track your profit margin at the granular level, because it might impact basically the bottom line of your business if you do not pay attention to that. So that is something that you really need to pay attention to. The next point that John talked about at the very beginning is your ability to renew contract or guarantee the automatic renewability of your existing business without investing a lot of manpower behind it. You shouldn't have to get one of your sales team to call every customer for every subscription or recurring revenue or as a service revenue to actually call them to renew that. You should have the right tools and the automation in place to guarantee it, because that's part of the customer success, that's part of continuity, and that is part of growth. And that automatic renewability by itself also presents an opportunity to expand and to upsell your existing customers. I'm just going to mute. Sorry about that. Now, The last point here is globalization, how important that is in the digital economy and in the digital space. Like I said, once you're on the internet, once you're transacting digitally, you're out there. Customers from around the globe will be able to reach your services. And the question becomes, why not? Why don't we consider actually enabling our digital services and enabling our as a service, since it is being done through e-commerce or digital commerce? Why don't we enable it to be global? And that means you should pay attention to languages, you should pay attention to compliance, you should pay attention to tax calculation and tax compliance, and you should pay attention to currency conversion and currency basically management. With the compliance, as you can see with conflicts going all over the globe today, you also want to make sure that your product are not being bought by their own customer. And now there are actually tools that allow you to take care of all of that. I think one of the persisting questions, and allow me to answer this question not as a CEO of a vendor, but as someone who's got some experience in the industry. When you're choosing the right tools, what do you need to consider, basically, so that you can choose the right tools? It is important to note, and I'm going back to the same slide because teams and the functional functions within the software, they go together. Obviously, one single tool is not going to be enough to do that. So if you go and buy, for example, a CPQ or a quoting tool, is this enough for you to enable your as a service or your subscription? You might be able to get the first deal. It might solve the first step of your digital journey with the customer, but it doesn't solve everything. You've got challenges of contract management, challenges of billing, challenges of renewals, challenges of service delivery, challenges of channel. So what you are going to need all these tools so that you can have a successful journey. So the first thing you want to consider is, do I have the right tools? Can I actually get one platform that give me all of these tools in one, or start with one module where I can actually expand and build on the same platform, the same technology, the same foundation, so I don't have to train my people on multiple systems. I don't have to worry about swivel sharing between systems. I don't have to worry about integration. I don't have to worry about systems of records. Where is my data? So this is something that you want to consider. That platform should have enough, or all of your tools if you can, so that you can really have a successful journey. The second point that you want to consider is this platform capable of handling growth, capable of handling the complexity, capable of handling the revenue, and capable the volume, and capable of handling the automation. So these are the points that you want to consider basically when you're choosing the right tools. Needless to say, of course, that our platform has the right answer to all of that. But as you're going through that journey, these are the questions you need to ask yourselves, and this is what you need to look at when you are selecting the right tool. The last point that I want to end this webinar with, before I take your questions, is this significance, the importance of having a rich dashboard that gives you detailed analysis of what's going on in your business. This dashboard and that kind of advanced reporting is important to have. You know, when I was talking about the margin, the profit margin, the margin radar, and being profitable at every transaction and every product, how do you do that without a dashboard that tells you this is what you're making, that's the details of it, this product is making more money for you than that product, this channel is making more revenue or generating more revenue for you than that channel, that region, that market sector. These details are important to guide you through basically the growth of your business and to make your journey successful. We talked about the margin radar is our term for that profit margin analysis, which is part of the component that you need in the dashboard. The next one is obviously revenue recognition. You've got compliances here with recurring revenue, with subscription, with as a service. You probably can collect cash in advance and collect payments in advance for services that you're going to render over a quarter or over a year. you have to have revenue recognition. Otherwise, you've got compliance challenges, and you don't want that. And the last piece is there are so many compliance to consider when you're doing that. Make sure that you're getting the right dashboard and the right report that tells you about that, whether it is something to do with data privacy, whether it's something to do with tax compliance. John touched on the tax compliance. That is not something to be taken lightly. You cannot underestimate that, especially when you grow and operate in multiple regions or basically globally. That was the last slide and the last point I wanted to consider. Do we have any questions from the audience, John, that we can take?
So we do have a few questions from the audience already in queue. We are running out of time for today, but I wanted to let everybody know if you still would like to submit a question for Youssef, please put it in the Ask a Question box. And even if we aren't able to answer your question here live, we will make sure to respond to you. So with that, I will squeeze in one question here, Youssef, and it comes from Lewis. And they ask, in your experience, what departments are typically tasked with preparing the SaaS framework? Who should be involved, and what is the dream team?
Now, there is this concept in the industry that is called the Chief Digital Officer or Chief Digital Transformation Officer. Generally, either a specialized consultant or a team in that scope and in that definition are the ones that are basically tasked to take the lead in that. But you have to remember that that digital transformation team cannot do that on their own. You really need to get the entire organization mobilized to support that journey. Otherwise, that team cannot do it on their own. They take the lead, but the revenue organization needs to support them. The finance organization needs to support them, and also the service delivery or the operational organization needs to also support them.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we have come to the conclusion of today's live webinar. So a few quick reminders before we sign out for today. There will be an exit survey.
One more point I think is important. You mentioned it, but I'd like to emphasize it. We will take all the questions that we received in the chat, and we will be sure to answer each and every one. And if you would like to send additional questions, feel free to do so. I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Okay, thank you. So with that exit survey, if you could take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and experience, a recorded version of today's webinar will be sent to you within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank our presenters, John and Youssef, for delivering an outstanding session. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, Moving to a Subscription-Based Business, a Practical Guide, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by BluLogix. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.